Star Trek Academy Collision Course, Chapter 29. Do you understand what I just told you? Commander Bearden asked. Spock was sitting across from the legal officer in the familiar interrogation room. It was now being used as a private conference area for prisoner and advocate. Yes, I do, Spock said. Bearden frowned. Then what's the problem? You can be out of here in an hour. He pushed a thin folder across the table to his client. The notational staff of the Vulcan embassy was embossed on the cover. Just sign. Spock stared at the folder, didn't touch it. What am I missing, Mr. Spock? Spock thought about that. Nothing of which I am aware, Commander. Bearden took out a small white cloth and mopped his brow. There are 2 consular agents in the reception area waiting to escort you back to your embassy, where you will transport up to the starship to class. 3 days later, you'll be home and enrolled in the Vulcan Science Academy. Starfleet's Judge Advocate General has already signed the agreement that accepts your enrollment there as meeting the terms of Judge Otago's sentence to enlist in Starfleet. All of this arranged in less than 2 hours, Spock observed. I gather your father's an important man in diplomatic circles. Indeed. Bearden's eyes narrowed. Mr. Spock, excuse me if this is too personal a question, but do you and your father get along? Spock knew the answer, but it was not something to be discussed with anyone outside the family, let alone an alien. He did not get along with his father, and the fault was entirely Sarek's. His refusal to explain to his own son why Vulcan artifacts were allowed to be stolen from the embassy's collection was evidence enough. Spock knew his father was somehow connected to the thefts, just as he knew the human Abel Griffin was lying when he implied that Sarek was seeking sexual favors as recompense. There was, however, no logical path he could find that would unite these 2 facts. Yet it was obvious that Sarek, by brokering this deal with Starfleet, was only doing so to prevent his son from continuing his own investigation of the thefts. Spock could not allow his father to control his life so blatantly. He was 19 now, an adult. He was fully capable of accepting responsibility for his actions, especially, Spock thought, when his actions were logical and correct. He decided to accept the judge's offer of enlisting in Starfleet. That was the best way to continue his investigation, because the Starfleet Training Center was just across the bay. Even after 1 week of basic training, he learned he'd be given weekend liberty, and for that week, he'd have access to library computers during his personal time. His mother had correctly said there would be consequences, and he welcomed them now, affirming his new maturity. My father and I enjoy a close relationship, Spock lied, as fathers and sons do. He moved the embassy folder back across the table to Bearden. You're enlisting in Starfleet, then? It is the most logical decision, Spock said. There was another truth that Spock was not sharing with the commander or anyone else. As he contemplated the prospect of living his own life without parental guidance, of never again being shuttled from one diplomatic compound to the next, under constant surveillance from his mother, his father, the embassy staff, and their agents, the small hidden human part of Spock found that prospect thrilling. I know it's unfair, Lieutenant Commander North said to her client, but my request for an appeal was denied until you've chosen a sentence. Then I can protest it. Kirk paced the length of the interrogation room, back and forth. He was furious that he'd been trapped so easily. The consequences of his stupidity were enormous. If he didn't return to the docks with details of Mallory's dilithium theft investigation, his brother would be killed, and without proof of the real thieves, Alyssa would be drummed out of Starfleet at her honor board hearing. I'll protest it, Kirk raged. I'm going to tell that judge. Sit down, Norse ordered. You will not tell the judge anything. Do you understand, mister? Kirk stopped pacing but refused to sit. No one was going to tell him what to do. Never again. What I understand is that you and the commander lied to me. Norris was incensed. We did not. We presented the best option available. And it turned out to be the wrong one, didn't it? Kirk felt like throwing his chair at his advocate. What a surprise! Starfleet geniuses make a mistake, and I'm the one who pays for it. We did not make a mistake, Norris said. The judge is completely out of line. The appeal will succeed. Kirk finally sat down at the conference table. How long will it take? A week? Maybe 2? And meanwhile, you'll be over at the STC. You'll live. Forgive me for not having much faith in your legal judgment. The lieutenant commander was clearly nearing her limit of tolerance. You are not making this easy. Me? Kirk said bitterly. I'm the one who did what you said and lost 2 years of my life. And now you're telling me what to do again. And how do I know the appeal judge won't say, oh, the first judge went too easy. Let's add another 2 years to the sentence. Norris gripped the back of her chair, and Kirk could tell she was close to throwing it at him now. There is no legal basis for extending your sentence, the officer insisted. There is no legal basis for the sentence the judge gave you today. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The appeal will succeed because the law is on our side, your side. Starfleet law. I don't think so. Norris suddenly came to some decision. She sat back down at the table, all tension gone. Then I take it you'd like another advocate to represent you. Yes, Kirk said, like someone who knows what he's doing, a real lawyer, not someone in uniform. I will put in that request, Norris said evenly, but you will still need me to be with you tomorrow when you give the judge your decision. I'm not going to give her one. Norris shook her head. You have to. You can't appeal the sentence until it's been pronounced. Give her a decision. Then your new lawyer can start to work on the appeal right away. New Zealand. That's halfway around the world. So, a Starfleet training center is 10 minutes from here. Kirk put his hands on the table and leaned forward. My point exactly. Norris made a note on her pad and got up, pad tucked under her arm. I hope you don't regret your decision. The moment the door closed behind her, Kirk regretted everything. The 511 Lounge was one of the pleasanter public areas on Space Dock, and Mallory always enjoyed an excuse to sit at one of its tables. Out the main viewports, it stretched up 3 decks. The vast interior of the facility's main dry dock could be seen. Right now, 2 starships are in port for replenishment, the Exeter and the battered science vessel Endurance. Several other smaller vessels filled the lesser berths, but the center of attention, closest to the lounge windows, was the starship berth for major upgrading, the magnificent Enterprise. The Constitution-class beauty had been in space dock for 5 months now, and her refit was almost complete. Mallory studied her as an artist might gaze at an old master. You could see shipwrights working on her port engineering hull, sputter-sealing plates, so it was no longer possible to tell which were originals and which were replacements for those damaged during the failed boarding attempt by Orion pirates. Mallory guessed that one of the small, environmental-suited figures was probably Chris Pike himself. The ship's new captain had been a familiar figure on Space Dock these past 5 months, taking a literally hands-on approach to the refit. Rumor was that Pike had spent 4 days actually doing welding on the new bridge, and had even been seen with his shirt off unloading supplies from the cargo transporters. True or not, the refit of the Big E was running 3 weeks ahead of schedule, a tribute to the expertise and enthusiasm of her crew and her captain. Mr. Mallory. The crisp enunciation of his name summoned Mallory from his reverie. He stood to greet his guest. Representative Terev, thank you for meeting with me, off the record, as it were. The distinguished Vulcan gave a small nod of acknowledgement. But what he was thinking, as usual, Mallory couldn't judge. As they took their chairs at the small table, a server arrived with a service of ginger tea. Terev had been on the GGS steering committee long enough for Mallory to know the official's preferences, if not his thought processes. Mallory politely poured for his guest. This extract is from the new greenhouses in Utopia Planitia. They can be opened to the Martian atmosphere during summer days now. Apparently, the taste is quite distinctive. Terev savored the scent of the tea. I have heard that. I appreciate the chance to experience it for myself. With his token bribe offered and accepted graciously, Mallory went straight to the reason for the meeting. Vulcans weren't known for small talk. I need a favor. Terev raised no objections, merely sipped his tea and drew in a breath of air with a delicate slurp. The son of a member of the Vulcan Embassy staff has been charged in a petty offense against Starfleet property. Terev gazed at the small pottery cup in his hands. Spock, son of Sarek. Mallory nodded, unsurprised that the Vulcan representative already knew what this meeting was about. His own office had been flooded with calls. Apparently, an agreement has been reached between your authorities and Starfleet to have Spock's sentence served on Vulcan as a student at the Science Academy. If I may interrupt to bring a preamble to its logical conclusion. Of course, Mallory said. There is no need for you to ask me to intercede, as inappropriate an action as that would be. Spock has rejected the agreement. Mallory was honestly taken aback. Really? Then he remembered that wasn't the sort of question to ask a Vulcan. Why would they say anything that wasn't accurate? I mean, I find that an unusual decision for a Vulcan. Spock is an unusual young man. Mallory contemplated the delicacy of Terev's statement. May I ask in what way? Terev put down his teacup, positioning it just so in relation to the serving pot, the serving dish of honey, the spoon, and the crisply folded linen napkin. He has a unique family background, which I am not at liberty to discuss. Ah, Mallory said. He had a good idea what unique might mean in this circumstance. Somewhere in Spock's family background, alien DNA had joined his bloodline. Having seen the young man up close, he'd have to guess the alien ancestor in Spock's case was a human. As a rule, Mallory knew, alien hybridization was a difficult undertaking. However, to the ongoing bafflement of researchers, most humanoid species in the quadrant shared intriguing genetic similarities, and there was much ongoing debate about the implications of those similarities. One school argued that there was some thus far undiscovered principle of nature that meant that independently arisen carbon-based life forms could evolve only along certain specific paths, which is absolutely ridiculous and anti-Darwinian. A more radical outlook maintained that the humanoid species in this region of space shared an ancient and mysterious ancestor. Nothing had as yet been determined. But whatever the reason, human-Vulcan hybridization was not impossible. Yet, given the historic Vulcan sensitivity to human emotions, Mallory appreciated why a Vulcan family would not be eager to share the news of a human ancestor. I understand, Mallory said, letting Terev know he would not pry. Of course, the Vulcan said, Spock's unique background in no way impairs his judgment. Mallory suppressed a smile. To a Vulcan, that comment was no doubt a necessary clarification. To a human, though, it could be seen as an insult. In fact, Terev continued, the reason the agreement between the authorities and Starfleet was so quickly arranged is because the Science Academy had been expecting to receive Spock as a student. He was already accepted there? Not formally, Terev explained. However, Spock is well known to the governors. Even at his young age, he has authored several significant scientific papers in a variety of subjects, from archaeology to Klingon literature. Eclectic interests, Mallory said amiably. Terev nodded gravely. Which is why Spock's father arranged Spock's acceptance at the Science Academy, to help channel his son's as yet unfocused intellect into a single field, astrophysics, the science specialty of his father and his grandfather. A family tradition. An Earth term, but in this instance correct. Mallory realized he now knew why Spock had rejected the sentence arrangement. However many generations removed, there was a human side to him, and it was rebelling against authority. It was clearly time to move off this particular topic. Would you happen to know which of the judge's two options Sarek's son will choose at his sentencing? I regret that Spock is not acting in a logical fashion, and so I find myself unable to predict his decision. I understand, Mallory agreed, knowing full well there was only one decision that would be suitably rebellious. A Vulcan enlisting in Starfleet, he thought. What an opportunity. And now, Terev said, may I request of you some information that could also be considered off the record? Mallory liked nothing better than to have a member of his oversight committee owe him a favor. Of course. It also concerns Spock. Mallory waited, intrigued. Sarek reports that his son has deduced that a theft ring is in operation at the embassy. For a moment, Mallory was unsure how to respond. I've met with Spock. He said nothing about it. It is likely he considers it a Vulcan matter. That would make sense. Thank you, Terev said politely. Would Spock's arrest on what are obviously false charges be connected to that operation? Mallory waved away the server who approached the table to refill their tea. We were originally interested in someone else, a human teenager we arrested with Spock. The technique he used to steal the staff car was identical to the one used to steal dilithium from the Academy. Terev gave Mallory a searching look, as if trying to decide if he were telling the whole truth. According to the latest briefing I've read, Starfleet believes the dilithium was stolen by the same criminal organization to whom our agents are selling the stolen artifacts. Mallory nodded. Because of your embassy's ongoing assistance, we're close to identifying all members of the group. We even know where they're based, but we still don't know for whom they're working or why they're stealing the strange assortment of items they've been stealing. What is clear is that they have a source of information inside Starfleet. Right now, we don't know who or what that source is. Is there a possibility that this other teenager is connected to the criminal organization? Definitely, Mallory said, but not by way of criminal activity. How else could he be involved? I think it's through a midshipman, Alyssa Corso, the other teenager's girlfriend. She's the one all the evidence points to in the dilithium theft. I think what happened is that she was set up by the real thieves. What they didn't count on is that her boyfriend, his name's Jim Kirk, took it upon himself to prove her innocence. Somehow, he figured out how the dilithium was stolen, built a clever little device to demonstrate the technique, and then things just got out of hand. In the final analysis, then, neither Spock nor this James Kirk deserves to be arrested. Mallory smiled. Spock? No. Kirk? He needs a good slap on the wrist, but he's no criminal, just confused, just as Spock seems to be. Trev took in a sharp breath as if he'd been insulted. No disrespect, Representative, but perhaps the teenagers of our two species aren't all that different when it comes to navigating the shores of adult responsibility. Perhaps, Trev said, letting Mallory know this wasn't a topic to be explored. May I ask then why the two teenagers have been subjected to this treatment, when it is clear they do not deserve it? In confidence, Mallory replied, letting Trev know this also was not a topic to be explored. Observation from a distance isn't enough. We need a way into that organization, one that can't be traced back to Starfleet. Trev understood. Because any Starfleet operation could be exposed by the organization's unknown source. Mallory nodded. One last request, Trev proceeded, without waiting for Mallory to grant permission. Leave Spock out of this. That I can't do. Trev did not accept defeat easily. That is illogical. You recruited him for the operation. You can exclude him. Truth is, Mallory said, Spock recruited himself. If he had chosen to return to Vulcan, I wouldn't have tried to stop him. But he's elected to stay, and so when it comes to his dealings with the criminals, Starfleet can't be seen to be involved with him. Mr. Mallory, if young Spock comes to harm because of this operation, the relations between your world and mine could be severely harmed. Mallory took the warning seriously. I trust in your logic too much to think you would allow that to happen. You and I both know the threat the Federation is facing on the frontier. A threat that Vulcan analysts cannot predict. A threat that we cannot combat without committing atrocities. This is not a time for dissension in our ranks. If there's the slightest chance there's a connection between these criminals we're chasing on Earth and the warlord who's attacking our colonies, then finding out who he is and what he wants is more important than interrupting the social life of two teenagers for a few weeks. Trev gave Mallory a withering look. Spock is Vulcan. He does not have a social life to interrupt. That's probably why he chose to stay on Earth. Trev rose to his feet. The meeting was over. Thank you for the tea, Mr. Mallory. Mallory stood as well. Thank you for your time, he said formally. As the Vulcan walked away with regal bearing, Mallory sat down again and stared out at the Enterprise. In the days when he'd served on the Constitution, the first of this great ship's class, life had seemed simpler. He'd never had to choose the lesser of two evils. Now he did, and he wondered what kind of a man or a monster that made him. Chapter 30. I met your father out front. Kirk turned his back on Alyssa and the force field that confined him to the small, one-person holding cell. He'd been separated from Spock as soon as they were led from the courtroom. He half suspected the Vulcan had cut some kind of deal, leaving him the only one to get punished. And for what? Nothing. He wants to see you, Jim. Well, I don't want to see him, okay? They've canceled my honor board hearing. Kirk turned around to face her. You said they postponed it. Alyssa's smile was brilliant. They did, but my advisor just called me. He said someone from Starfleet Security showed up, presented the results of their own investigation, and the Academy dropped the charges against me. Jim, they're not even coming after me for not protecting my codes. That's great. You could sound happier. Come on, Alyssa. The only reason I built the override and used it on the staff car was to prove you were innocent. Kirk shook his head in frustration at how everything had gone wrong for him. And then Starfleet Security waltzes in and makes it all go away today instead of a week ago. He slammed his hand against the wall beside the cell door. Alyssa had the decency to look sorry. I guess we both should have had more faith in the system. Kirk didn't trust himself to say anything in response to that garbage. At least, it's over. I'm happy for you. Alyssa went to reach for Kirk, remembered the force field. Me too, because Starfleet Training Center is a lot closer to Sam's place. We can take the monorail to visit each other. What? Kirk just looked at her, and that told Alyssa all she needed to know. New Zealand? Alyssa's eyes flashed. I know exactly what I'm doing. So do I. You're running away again. What again? What about your father's farm? You ran away from that and him, and now you're running away from me. I'm not, Kirk protested. Then why New Zealand? It's the right decision for me. Kirk couldn't tell Alyssa it was the only way out of his impossible situation, that it was the only way he could save his brother. Matthew had said it himself. If Kirk was locked up and sent to a penal colony, Sam would be off the hook. But not for me. Us? Alyssa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I thought this was actually going to work out for us, you know? You do great at STC. You could be an engineer, a pilot, anything you wanted to be. Not in Starfleet. Why not? Your life's a mess, and here you are throwing away another chance to fix it. Alyssa moved as close as she could to the security bars. Don't you get it? That's why you're always so eager to help me and Sam and stray dogs and any stranger that walks by, so you don't have to help yourself. Kirk reacted swiftly, overcome by frustration, by what he couldn't tell her. If my life's a mess, it's because I tried to help you. Jim, your life's a mess because you're not in school. You're doing odd jobs in the back of technology stores. You're living on your brother's old couch. No wonder your father's worried about you. So am I. And you're not letting any of us help you. Kirk could see it in her eyes. Alyssa was working herself up to leave. Not just this detention facility in the lower levels of Starfleet headquarters. She was getting ready to leave him. You know what's really sad? Alyssa said. You say you hate Starfleet, but that's always going to be a part of me, and you knew that when you met me. The real story is you won't admit how much you want what I have. It's like I was your surrogate Starfleet. Kirk knew there was nothing he could do now but end this conversation, and this was a perfect opening. Was? You're telling me we're over? You're the one going away for 2 years. You told me. Then she was gone, without a single look back. Kirk stood at the sealed door, thrumming with unrelieved frustration until the one mindless thing he could do occurred to him. He punched his fist into the force field savagely. A minute later, when he came back to consciousness, lying flat on the floor, he had a different kind of pain to deal with. You hear what I'm saying, Georgie? Sam flinched as he saw spittle fly from Griffin's mouth. He thought last night had been the worst experience of his life, but he was wrong. What was happening now was much worse. Last night, he'd been forced at Disruptor Point into a storage locker on the lowest deck of the Pacific Rome. The cold of San Francisco Bay had seeped through the hull, and he'd felt as if he was going to freeze to death. There was no light, no food or water, nothing but hard deck plating to sit on. But it was too cold to sit for long, and he had had no choice but to walk back and forth all night, 3 steps in each direction, trying to stay warm. Now he was in Griffin's office, his hands bound behind his back by power cable. Beside him were his guards, 2 Vulcans. Sam had no idea where they'd come from or why they were working with Griffin. Dala was also in the small, cramped room. Her blood-red skin suit was the same vivid color as her glistening tied-back hair, and instead of a new genus of butterfly painted across her eyes, this time she'd colored her entire face Andorian blue. Somewhere behind him were Matthew and 2 other kids Sam didn't know by name. The kids held lasers aimed at him. Griffin stalked back and forth before them all in a rage. Sam knew he was only moments away from being shot. But terrified as he was also freezing, exhausted, and he knew he couldn't think straight. He began to moan in fear. Listen, a day after your brother goes crawling back to Starfleet, his girlfriend's cleared. No questions, no more investigation. You tell me why, and you tell me now. Griffin slapped Sam's face. The blow shocked Sam into a semblance of coherence. Griff, please, I told you, Jimmy would never give you up. He never would. Griffin stared into Sam's eyes like a jungle cat. Face it, dead man. Your brother has a choice to make. You or his girlfriend. Guess who he chose? Sam trembled. Jimmy wouldn't do anything to hurt me. He wouldn't, I swear. And give me one reason why they'd clear Alyssa Corso. Sam gathered all his remaining strength. Because she didn't do anything. Starfleet can figure that stuff out. Griffin grabbed Sam by the throat with one huge hand. I played too much evidence against her for Starfleet to clear her just like that. Sam began to gag, his vision blurred. Griffin released him abruptly, and the Vulcan guards caught him, one to each side, kept him on his feet. I'll give you a reason, Georgie, Griffin growled. He strode over to the kids with lasers, stood between them. Someone sold me out, and if it wasn't little Jimmy, then it was someone else who's standing here, right here, a traitor with the guts to look me in the eyes and say he didn't do it. Griffin suddenly pointed at Dalla. Or she didn't do it. Dalla laughed dismissively. Like I'm going to turn in the only guy who can get me off the dullest planet in the galaxy. Griffin mimicked her laugh. All right, you only care about yourself. He held out his hand to Matthew. Disruptor, he said. Sam felt his legs begin to shake, his knees lose their strength. The only reason he was still standing was because the Vulcans were bracing him. Matthew slapped the Klingon weapon into Griffin's hand. He set the dial without looking. Now Georgie here, he cares about all sorts of things, like his brother, like doing the right thing, as if he could. Griffin raised the disruptor. I can't have traitors in my organization. He motioned with the weapon back and forth. You two, let him go. Sam closed his eyes, all hope gone. But the Vulcans kept their grip on him. I believe this one could still be a valuable source of information, one said. Yeah? Well, that's why I'm the boss and you two are lackeys. Let him go so the chain reaction from this thing doesn't spread. The Vulcans stepped back and Sam fell to the floor on his knees, waiting. Look up, Georgie, Griffin said. You don't want to miss this. He fired. The Vulcan on Sam's left blazed with incandescence, and as his form began to fall, he simply faded from existence. A moment later, the second Vulcan disrupted into nothingness. Dalla waved her hand in front of her nose, making a face at the acrid smell of electricity and burned flesh. Griffey, you really think those guys had the bootlet to sell you out? Griffin rubbed the side of his face with the disruptor muzzle. Who knows? I'm almost done here, and it never hurts to tie up loose ends. Griffin bent down to Sam. Does it, Georgie? Sam nodded, still in shock. Griffin casually gestured with the weapon as he continued. Because I still need to talk to your little brother. Find out what Mallory said to him about Alyssa. And I'm not going to be able to do that if he gets shipped off to New Zealand, am I? Sam found his voice. But Matthew said you'd let me go if Jimmy got sent away. Griffin jammed the disruptor against Sam's cheek. Matthew works for me, and so do you, Georgie. Understood? Sam nodded, breathing again only when the disruptor moved away from him. So go talk some sense into Jimmy. He's going to take the Starfleet option so he can stay in town and I can talk with him. Okay, Griff, I'll do that. Sam hated the way his voice quavered, but he couldn't steady it. I know you will. Griffin nodded back at the kids with rifles. Because you're not your brother. And there's no place you can hide from me or them. And if you don't do what I want, I'm not going to disintegrate you. I'm going to burn you. Slowly. That's a promise. Griffin stood up, snapped his fingers at the kids with rifles. Get him out of here. Sam forced himself to his feet, allowed the two kids to untie his hands. escort him out of the office. Gradually, his breath came back to him, then his strength. He knew he was going to need both if he and Jimmy were to get away. He wasn't stupid enough to lead his brother back here. He and Jimmy were loose ends, and before Griffin left Earth, he'd kill them both. Chapter 31. Morning stretch. Spock had anticipated Kirk's arrival in the joint holding cell, and so had decided not to meditate. With Kirk around, there seemed little point. "Good morning," Spock said as the guards who had escorted Kirk to the cell resealed the door with force field and bars. Kirk tugged on the shoulder of his bright orange jumpsuit with the word prisoner printed across the front, up the arms and legs, and across the back. Snappy uniforms, huh? A sensible precaution for most prisoners. Spock wore the same type of clothing. Of his personal belongings, he'd been allowed to keep only his Idic medallion, which he wore beneath the jumpsuit. He was gratified, but surprised that the guards had not bothered to scan it, so its secret was undetected. Kirk sat down on the bench beside Spock. "You know, I didn't expect to see you here today." "Indeed. I figured they would have packed you up back to Vulcan by now." Spock was impressed that Kirk had that much insight into interplanetary politics. "The opportunity was offered," Spock said. "Why didn't you take it?" Spock declined to get into family business with this troublesome human. "All things considered, I concluded remaining on Earth is a better choice for me at this time." Kirk leaned forward, resting his arms on his legs. "Let me guess, you're signing up for the STC." "Correct." Kirk laughed. "Sucker." Spock wondered what a confection had to do with anything they'd been discussing, but had learned his lesson. Asking the human to explain himself generally resulted in further confusion. Thus he used his standard reply, "Indeed." For some reason that prompted further laughter from Kirk. It ended when a red-shirted guard appeared at the door. "Kirk, visitor." Spock was fascinated to see how quickly Kirk went from expressing humor to concern. "Tell my father I'll see him in the courtroom." Spock was puzzled by the negativity he detected in the young human's manner. He'd supposed Kirk's relationship with his father would be more positive, not like his relationship with Sarek. Then again, having witnessed the speed of the human teenager's changing emotions, perhaps the nature of their child-parent relationship also changed throughout the day. Spock did recall hearing that humans were prone to that, his own mother, of course, being a welcome exception to the general pattern. "It's not your father," the guard said with disinterest. He gestured to the side, and a human Spock had never seen stepped nervously into view. Again, Kirk underwent a change in his emotional state. He jumped to his feet with joy, crying, "Sam!" Spock marveled that such beings had ever achieved a technological civilization. Kirk stood as close to the force field as he could, making sure he blocked Sam's line of sight to Spock, and spoke in a barely audible whisper. "Keep your voice down. You wouldn't believe how good this guy's hearing is." Sam didn't look as if he cared. "Nice to see you, too." Kirk knew time was limited. He and Spock were due in court in the next 10 minutes. Yeah, I know. How'd you get away?" Then, just before Sam began to answer, Kirk held a finger to his lips, mouthed, "No names." Sam seemed distracted or nervous or tired. Kirk couldn't be certain which. "Okay," Sam said. "The guy let me go." Kirk guessed the guy in question was either Matthew or whoever Matthew had been listening to on his privacy earpiece. "Did the guy say why?" From the way Sam nodded, Kirk knew. His brother was nervous. "You can tell me," Kirk prompted. "I'm supposed to convince you to stay in San Francisco." "You mean enlist?" Sam's face tightened. "I know what that means to you, but..." Kirk hated the force field. He needed to touch his brother to tell him it was going to be okay, that he would make everything okay for him, that he always would. "Talk to me, Sam. Why does he need me here? He's got to know they dropped the case against Alyssa. There's nothing more I can tell him." The guy told me he still needed to know what Mallory said to you about why the case was dropped." "But I haven't seen Mallory since I got back here." Kirk tugged at his prisoner jumpsuit to illustrate his next point. "This didn't exactly go as you-know-who planned." "I don't think it matters, Jimmy. The guy says he's almost finished here. And Dala?" Sam caught himself. "His girlfriend said something about going away, so I think he's getting ready to leave. Like Earth." Kirk wasn't getting it. "He wants to tie up loose ends," Sam said in such a low voice Kirk had to strain to hear what he was saying over the hum of the force field emitters. "That's you and me, Jimmy. He's going to kill us both." Kirk blinked. Having seen Matthew in action on Tarsus 4, he knew that was possible, but... "Sam, listen. If he's going off planet, then he doesn't have to do anything to us. If he's a thief, no one will bother going after him. But if he's a murderer, they'll track one of those anywhere. This guy's too smart to risk drawing that much heat." Now Sam's voice was so soft Kirk had to read his lips. "He's already killed some people." He looked both ways along the corridor outside the hall, then mouthed the words, "2 Vulcans." That made absolutely no sense to Kirk. He mouthed back, "What were Vulcans doing there?" Sam gestured, palms up, indicating he didn't know. "I saw him do it." Kirk thought a minute. Then he had it. "He faked it. He was just trying to shake you up." Sam shook his head. "They disintegrated, Jimmy. He used that alien gun, you know the one." That stopped Kirk. It was time to accept that events had moved far beyond anything he could handle on his own. "We got to tell someone, Sam." Sam's reaction was instant panic. "No, we can't. We've got to run. Go into hiding." "Shh," Kirk hissed. Sam dropped his voice to a desperate whisper. "I mean it. If we go to him, he's going to kill us. And he'll kill me if you go to New Zealand. But if you stay here, we can run away together. You know how to do that, Jimmy. I don't." "Get real, Sam," Kirk said quietly. "If I run off with you, the guy is the least of our worries. Starfleet will come after me. That's who we have to tell. Wait till they hear the guy killed..." He mouthed the word Vulcans. Sam clasped his hands together, pleading. "Please, please listen to me. Enlist. Stay close. Then all we have to do is stay hidden long enough for the guy to leave. Then you can tell Starfleet anything you want. Just let him leave, and we'll be safe, and Starfleet can go find him. You said that yourself." Kirk hated it when someone, even Sam, used his own reasoning against him, but it was too late to say more. The guards were coming down the hallway with Commander Bearden and Lieutenant Commander Norse. "Please," Sam said one last time, and then he was gone. As soon as the door deactivated and opened once again, Spock stepped up beside Kirk and looked at him with dead calm intensity. It was as if the Vulcan had heard every word. No one in the world, outside the holding cell, seemed too interested in the fate of 2 teenagers in trouble. That was the first thing Kirk thought, as he was led through the side door and into the antique courtroom. In the gallery, Kirk saw his father, regarding him today with sorrow instead of anger. Beside his father, Sam, his face drawn with worry. On another gallery bench, Kirk saw a single Vulcan, tall, distinguished, in a simple civilian suit. "Is that your father?" Kirk asked Spock as the two of them sat down at the defendant's table. "No, he is Representative Terev of the Federation Council. Is he here to talk some sense into you?" "I do not know. I have never met him." Kirk scanned the other faces in the gallery. There weren't many, and all belonged to humans, some of whom were in uniforms. He noted two civilians but didn't recognize them, so he decided they were here for some other case. As he wondered why neither of Spock's parents had bothered to show up, Kirk realized the two Vulcan agents from the Garden of Venus weren't present either, but they had been present for the sentencing hearing. Two Vulcans, he thought. He leaned close to Spock, shoulder to shoulder, felt Spock ease away. "What happened to the two agents from your embassy, the guys who were here yesterday?" Spock turned to Kirk with laser-focused eyes. That was when Kirk knew, "You heard what my brother and I talked about." Spock didn't give Kirk the satisfaction of an emotional response. All he said was, "Every word." Kirk grimaced. There was no way this Vulcan was going to keep anything secret. "We need to talk." "Agreed." Then the door by the judge's bench opened, and the yeoman in red stepped out to announce, "All rise." Kirk, Spock, their legal officers, and the observers in the gallery stood as Judge Mahina Otago entered and took her place behind the bench. She spent a few moments making sure her pad was turned on, checked a set of documents with the yeoman, then tapped her gavel lightly. "Good morning, everyone. This court-martial is in session. Are we ready to proceed?" Bearden replied that he, his colleague, and the prisoners were ready. "Very good. Commander Spock." Very good, Commander. Mr. Spock, have you had time to reflect on the options I presented to you yesterday?" "I have, Judge." "What's your choice?" "I choose to enlist in Starfleet." "So ordered." The judge tapped her gavel. "Anticipating your decision, I have spoken to the commander of the STC, and he has agreed to assign you to a new squad of recruits who will begin indoctrination and basic training tomorrow. May I add that if you fail to live up to the duties and effort expected of you as an enlisted recruit, you will not be separated from the service. You will be sent immediately to New Zealand. Is that understood?" "Yes, Judge." The judge looked relieved. "May I also say that I believe you have made a wise decision, and that if you behave yourself, Starfleet is fortunate to have you." "Indeed," Spock said. Kirk suppressed a snort of disgust. As far as he could tell, any time Spock didn't know what to say, he said, "Indeed." "And now, Mr. Kirk," the judge said, "I understand you have an affinity for the South Pacific and heavy construction." Kirk looked straight ahead, no longer even trying to work out how he had reached this awful moment, this relinquishing of control. "Judge," he said, forcing each word from his mouth, "I choose to enlist in Starfleet." Kirk caught the judge's flash of surprise. From the corner of his eye, he could see his three table mates staring at him. "You've had an epiphany, have you?" Kirk didn't dare say what he wanted to say, lifted a trick from Spock. "Indeed." The judge hesitated for only a moment. "So ordered." She tapped her gavel. "Same warning goes for you. You won't be given demerits or second warnings. You slip up even once, you're off to New Zealand too." Then the judge recorded something on her pad and addressed Kirk's legal officer. "Commander Bearden, I presume you and your colleagues would like to appeal these sentences now?" Bearden pulled a file from the folder on the table. "Yes, Judge. We prepared. I'll save us all some time." Otago tapped her gavel again. "Appeals denied." "Judge," Norris protested, "you can't rule until we've made our presentation." "I can do whatever I damn well please, Ms. Norris. But look on the bright side. Without wasting any of your time or this court's time, your appeals are now automatically bumped up to the review panel. Congratulations. You'll get to argue your case before 6 admirals and not just one. The judge held her gavel over its stand. Anything else? No one spoke. Very good. She tapped her gavel. We're done here. Next case, yeoman. As everyone stood up from the table, the judge smiled at Kirk and Spock. And Mr. Kirk, Mr. Spock, may I be the first to say, welcome to Starfleet. Thank you, Judge, Spock said. Kirk didn't respond. He had just surrendered his life and his freedom to the enemy, and he didn't know why he wasn't as upset as he should be. Chapter 32. Mallory paused before the beat-up metal door. He could see 4 layers of different colored paint among the assorted dings and scratches. The security scanner above the frame was cracked and plainly not working, and the hallway, with its sprayed-on carpet pattern, didn't look convincing even in the dim lighting from the flickering overhead panels. Plus, since entering the building on the street level 5 stories down, everything reeked of stale vegetable steaks. He could barely believe he was still on Earth. Almost 2 centuries since first contact with the Vulcans and the planet's emergence from the long shadows of war and poverty. And there was still reconstruction to be done in what were euphemistically called the, quote, historic neighborhoods of major cities. He knocked. A few moments later, he heard a deep voice call out, "Who is it?" "Master Chief Joseph Kirk." Mallory shouted back, "I'm Eugene Mallory, Starfleet Command." Mallory heard the buzz of the security lock switching off. Then the door opened a few centimeters, enough for him to see the powerfully built man on the other side, in neat civilian clothes, but still with his regulation haircut and service sideburns shaved to a point. "ID," Joe said brusquely. Mallory held up his case, activating it so his ID emerged. Then he waited because, unlike 99% of the people who ever saw that ID, Joe Kirk was actually examining it and knew what to look for. "Department of General Services?" he said. "Never heard of it." "We're small," Mallory conceded. "Special projects, mostly." Joe took a closer look at Mallory. "Special projects could cover a lot of ground. Today it covers your son, James. May I come in?" Joe stepped back from the door and opened it. Mallory was surprised when he crossed the threshold. Unlike the hallway, the apartment's interior smelled strongly of disinfectant and cleanser. And for such a run-down building, the room he had entered was in surprisingly good shape. The drab walls could use some paint, but everything was sparkling and squared away. Could have been a large suite on a starship. Mallory guessed that a few days earlier, before Master Chief Petty Officer Joseph Kirk came to town, the apartment had looked quite different, and had smelled different too. "I gather you've been busy," Mallory said. "You have any kids?" "2, boy and girl. Younger than your son's, but I can only imagine what my boy's apartment will look like when he moves out." Joe surveyed the apartment as if it still wasn't up to his standards. "That's what this one looked like, only worse." Mallory saw the aquarium and the darting orange and white cloud of clownfish. "Nice aquarium. Are they James's?" Joe went over to the tank, and the fish crowded close to him. "No, my other boy's, George, or Sam now. He's decided he doesn't like the name everyone's been calling him since the day he was born." Mallory heard the old anger in the man, yet watched how delicate his large hands were as he opened the aquarium's cover and carefully sprinkled a precise amount of fish food for his appreciative audience. "Children get their own ideas," Mallory commented, one father to another. Joe watched the fish. "Are you responsible for my Jimmy's getting a chance to enlist?" Mallory debated breaking security on his plan, but Joe Kirk's record in the fleet spoke for itself. The list of commendations alone ran 3 pages. Mallory asked the former Starfleet non-com a question he already knew the answer to. "You still have your security clearance?" Joe shot him a sidelong glance. "Is this a test?" Mallory didn't answer. "If you're as good as you seem to think you are, then you know I don't," Joe said. "I don't do any consulting. I'm not in the reserves. I did my 20 and I got out." Mallory had no qualms about trusting the man. "Then let's talk off the record, if that's why you're here." Mallory was beginning to see where Kirk's fierce independence had come from. "I'm the one who arranged for your son to be offered an opportunity to enlist." Joe looked as if he still couldn't believe it. "I didn't think they did that anymore." "Not in the civilian courts," Mallory agreed. "But every now and then when some youngster with promise interferes with Starfleet property, well, usually it's because they've got some interest in it. So instead of punishing them, we invite them in. Not every teenager has a clear idea of what he wants to do in life. Sometimes all it takes is a little push in the right direction." Joe put the container of fish food back on a tray of evenly arranged packages. "You think Jimmy has promise?" "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." "Grab a chair," Joe said. "I got some beer in the cooler." Mallory sat in a threadbare armchair that had seen better days, but had been realigned with a tightly folded blanket that served as an extra cushion. Joe came back from the kitchen alcove with 2 pouches of a local beer, tapped them on the serving table to make the pouches change shape and harden into cylinders, then peeled them open and handed one to his guest. Joe clinked a cylinder to Mallory's. "May rudders govern and ships obey." Mallory appreciated the traditional toast, offered one back. "Ourselves, because no one else is likely to concern themselves with our welfare." Joe understood. "What ship did you serve on?" Mallory had served on a few, but there was only one that mattered at a time like this. "The Constitution. Before your day, though. I checked." Joe approved, sat back on the couch. "How'd you get my boy to enlist?" "I think it's something he always wanted." Joe's face darkened. "You don't know him." "I think I do," Mallory said. "I've seen his files from school, from the Riverside Protectors, Star Cadets, Junior Explorers." The mention of the children's group made Joe smile. "And then something happened, didn't it?" The smile faded. Joe said nothing, and just as Mahina Otago had recognized a particular kind of silence, so did Mallory. The topic he had just touched on was something Joe had sworn never to discuss. "I have access to a great many files in my department," Mallory said easily. "So I think I've been able to fill in a few gaps in your son's history. But when Starfleet makes a promise, we keep it. And I give you my word, there's absolutely no mention of Tarsus 4 in any of James's records." Joe put his beer on the table. There was no more friendliness or approval in him. "Then why mention it now?" "He's one of the eyewitnesses, isn't he? One of the 9 people who actually saw Kodos and can identify him." Joe's eyes clouded. "That's not all he saw." "Master Chief, I don't mean to bring up bad memories." But it was too late for that. Mallory watched as a powerful man across from him seemed to shrink with age before his eyes. "It's just Joe. Those days are... It's just Joe. Joe, then. I need to know what your son can handle. Joe Kirk looked up in alarm. My son is under a death sentence. Word gets out that he's one of the 9... Joe stopped to catch his breath, tried to calm down. I never bought the story about them finding Kodos's body, not the way it was burned, no way to identify it. It's the sort of thing he'd do. Kill someone else to make it look as if he died, so no one would go looking for him. But if he's out there, then no one knows where. No one knows who he is or what he looks like now. So he could be anyone, anywhere, and you can be damn sure that after what he did to those colonists, he won't hesitate to kill anyone who can identify him, including my boy. Mallory knew there had been more than 4,000 casualties at Tarsus 4. He was looking at another right now. No one knows, Joe. I promise you that. I only put it together because of an anomaly in your boy's medical records. The inoculations he got before he left that summer. And the record of those inoculations has been deleted. I saw to that myself. Joe wasn't convinced. That's not enough intel to go on. You know more than that. Mallory decided to trust the man even more. One of my department's special projects is trying to track Kodos. So far, nothing. But we haven't given up, and we are keeping the names of the witnesses classified until we can be sure they're safe. Joe accepted that, recovering. Thank you for telling me. Mallory moved on. Tarsus 4 changed your son. How couldn't it? He was 14. Wanted to go out of the system so badly ever since he was a kid. Joe stared past Mallory, and Mallory knew he was looking into the past. One time I was home on leave, and Jimmy, he was 5. This one night we were out walking out in the fields, the wheat coming up, and the stars. It was in the middle of nowhere back then, our farm, and the stars were like you see them in space, clear, and the Milky Way on fire across the sky. And Jimmy wanted to know which ones I'd been to, the ones I'd seen up close. So I started pointing them out, naming them. And the look... Joe took a moment, caught up in this sweet lost moment. The look in his eyes as he heard those names. I knew he had it then, the dream, you know? Mallory nodded. It was something everyone at Starfleet knew so well. And Jimmy said to me, Daddy, I have to go there. And he meant all of them. And I picked him up and I told him he would. And I sent him to Tarsus 4, Mr. Mallory. I sent him to Tarsus 4 and I lost my boy. Mallory moved to sit beside the man till he had recovered. And then he made this promise. I'll do everything I can to get him back for you. Joe Kirk looked at Mallory like a man who desperately wanted to believe, but could not. Mallory knew the feeling all too well.